Many local variants of the Greek alphabet were employed in ancient Greece during the Archaic and early Classical periods, until they were replaced by the classical 24-letter alphabet that is the standard today, around 400 BC. All forms of the Greek alphabet were originally based on the shared inventory of the 22 symbols of the Phoenician alphabet, with the exception of the letter Samekh, whose Greek counterpart she was used only in a subgroup of Greek alphabets, and with the common addition of Upsilon for the vowel u. The local, so-called epichoric alphabets differed in many ways: in the use of the consonant symbols chi, phi and psi, in the use of the innovative long vowel letters, in the absence or presence of eta in its original consonant function, in the use or non-use of certain archaic letters, and in many details of the individual shapes of each letter. The system now familiar as the standard 24-letter Greek alphabet was originally the regional variant of the Ionian cities in Asia Minor. It was officially adopted in Athens in 403 BC and in most of the rest of the Greek world by the middle of the 4th century BC. Aspirate and consonant cluster symbols. A basic division into 4 major types of epichoric alphabets is commonly made according to the different treatment of additional consonant letters for the aspirated consonants and consonant clusters of Greek. These 4 types are often conventionally labeled as green, red, light blue, and dark blue types, based on a color-coded map in a seminal 19th-century work on the topic, Studienzur Geschichte des Griechischen Alphabets by Adolf Kirchhoff. The green type is the most archaic and closest to the Phoenician. The red type is the one that was later transmitted to the West and became the ancestor of the Latin alphabet, and bears some crucial features characteristic of that later development. The blue type is the one from which the later standard Greek alphabet emerged. Upsilon is also derived from WAW. The green type uses no additional letters beyond the Phoenician set, and typically also goes without she. Thus, the aspirated plosives p, k are spelled either simply as pi and kappa respectively, without a distinction from unaspirated p, k, or as digraphs pi eta, kappa eta. Likewise, the clusters PSKs have simply spelled pi sigma kappa sigma. This is the system found in Crete and in some other islands in the southern Aegean, notably Thera, Melos and Anafi. The red type also lacks Phoenician-derived G4Ks, but instead introduces a supplementary sign for that sound combination at the end of the alphabet, chi. In addition, the red alphabet also introduced letters for the aspirates phi equals p and psi equals k. Note that the use of chi in the red set corresponds to the letter X in Latin, while it differs from the later standard Greek alphabet, where chi stands for k and psi stands for ps. Only phi for p is common to all non-green alphabets. A red type is found in most parts of central mainland Greece, as well as the island of Euboea, and in colonies associated with these places, including most colonies in Italy. The light blue type still lacks she, and adds only letters for p and k. Both of these correspond to the modern standard alphabet. The light blue system thus still has no separate letters for the clusters PSKs. In this system, these are typically spelled phi sigma and chi sigma, respectively. This is the system found in Athens and several Aegean islands. The dark blue type, finally, is the one that has all the consonant symbols of the modern standard alphabet. In addition to phi and chi, it also adds psi and she. This system is found in the cities of the Ionian Dodecapolis, Knidos in Asia Minor, and in Corinth and Argos on the northeastern Peloponnese. Eta and Para The letter.The had two different functions, both derived from the name of its Phoenician model, heth. The majority of Greek dialects continued to use it for the consonant per hour, similar to its Phoenician value. However, the consonant per hour was progressively lost from the spoken language, and in those dialects where this had already happened early on in the Archaic period, eta was instead used to denote the long vowel, which occurred next in its name and was thus, in the per hour less dialects, its natural acrophonic value. Early Silotic dialects include Eastern Ionic Greek, the Aeolic Greek of Lesbos, as well as the Doric Greek of Crete and Elis. The distribution of vocalic eta and e differs further between dialects, because the Greek language had a system of three distinct e-like phonemes: the long open mid, the long close mid, e, and the short vowel, e. In the Silotic dialects of Anatolia and adjacent eastern Aegean islands, as well as Crete, vocalic eta was used only for. In a number of Aegean islands, notably Rhodes, Milos, Santorini and Paros, it was used both for per hour and for, without distinction. In Knidos, a variant letter was invented to distinguish the two functions. Eta was used for per hour and for. In South Italian colonies, especially Taranto, after c. 400 BC, a similar distinction was made between eta for and for per hour. This latter symbol was later turned into the diacritic sign for rough breathing by the Alexandrine grammarians. In Naxos the system was slightly different. Here, too, the same letter was used for per hour and for a long vowel, but only in those cases where a long e-like sound had arisen through raising from older a, not as other users of vocalic eta did. Also for the older, inherited from Proto-Greek. This probably means that while in the dialects of other eta uses the old and new long e had already merged in a single phoneme, the raising sound in Naxos was still distinct both from a and, hence, probably in like sound. Yet another distinction was found in a group of cities in the northeast of the Peloponnese, most notably Corinth. Here, it was not the open mid that was distinguished among the three e sounds, but the closed mid e. The normal letter epsilon was used exclusively from the latter, while a new special symbol stood both for short e and for. Yet another variation of the system is found in neighboring Tiryns. It uses the letter forms of the Corinthian system versus e, but with the functional values of the classic eta versus epsilon system. Archaic letters. Digamma. The letter digamma for the sound with was generally used only in those local scripts where the sound was still in use in the spoken dialect. During the Archaic period, this includes most of mainland Greece, as well as Euboea and Crete. In Athens and in Naxos it was apparently used only in the register of poetry. Elsewhere, i.e., in most of the Aegean islands and the East, the sound with was already absent from the language. The shape of the letter varies locally and over time. The most common early form is. Over time it developed in analogy with epsilon, becoming either the classical f or. Early Crete had an archaic form, or a variant with the stem bent sideways. Some local scripts used the M-shaped letter san instead of standard sigma to denote the sound per second. It is unclear whether the distinction between the two letters originally corresponded to different phonetic realizations of the per second phoneme in different dialects. Epigrapher Lillian Hamilton Jeffrey conjectured that san originally stood for a voice sound, and that those Doric dialects that kept san instead of sigma may have had such a pronunciation of per second. Roger Woodard, professor of classics at the University at Buffalo, hypothesizes that san may originally have stood for. In any case, each dialect tended to use either san or sigma to the exclusion of the other. and while the earliest to be Sideria listed both letter shapes separately in the separate alphabetic positions, later specimens from the 6th century onwards tend to list only one of them. San was used in Argos until the end of the 6th century, in Sicyon until c. 500, in Corinth until the first half of the 5th century, and in Crete for some time longer. Sicyon kept the sign as a local emblem on its coins. Copper. The archaic letter copper, used for the back allophone of k before back vowels, was originally common to most epichoric alphabets. It began to drop out of use from the middle of the 6th century BC. Some of the Doric regions, notably Corinth, Argos, Crete and Rhodes, kept it until the 5th century BC. Innovative letters. A few letters have arisen from innovative letter distinctions, most of them for local alphabets. Omega. The new letter omega to denote the long half-open sound was invented first in the East, in the Ionian cities of Asia Minor, at some time before 600 BC. It was created by breaking up the closed circle of the omicron, initially near the side. The letter was subsequently turned upright and the edges curled outwards. The Dorian city of Knidos, as well as a few Aegean islands, namely Paros, Thasos and Melos, chose the exact opposite innovation, using a broken-up circle for the short and a closed circle for the long o. Some Ionian cities used a special letter, alphabetically ordered behind omega, for a sibilant sound in positions where other dialects had either sigma sigma or tau tau. This symbol later dropped out of alphabetic use, but survived in the form of the numeral symbol sampi. As an alphabetic character, it has been attested in the cities of Miletus, Ephesus, Halicarnassos, Erythrae, Teos, in the island of Samos, in the Ionian colony of Massilia and in Kyzikos, in Pontic Mesembria, on the Black Sea coast of Thrace. It was used on coins, which were marked with the abbreviation of the city's name, spelled mu epsilon alpha. The sound denoted by this letter was a reflex of the Proto-Greek consonant clusters asterisk, 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 or asterisk, and was probably an intermediate sound during the phonetic change from the earlier plosive clusters towards the later per second sound, possibly and affricate similar to ts. Arcadian sound. In one attested document, the Arcado-Cypriot Greek of Mantinea used an innovative letter similar to, probably derived from a variant of san, to denote what was probably a like sound in environments reflecting etymological Proto-Greek asterisk k. Pamphylian digamma. In the highly divergent Pamphylian Greek, the letter digamma existed side by side with another distinctive form. It has been surmised that in this dialect the sound with may have changed to labiodental v in some environments. The F-shaped letter may have stood for the new v sound, while the special shaped form signified those positions where the old with sound was preserved. Boeotian raised e, a special letter for a variant realization of the short e sound, was briefly used in the Boeotian city of Thespiae in the late 5th century BC. It occurred in the place of normal epsilon whenever the sound stood before another vowel. Since its shape suggests a compromise form between an epsilon and an iota, it is thought that it denoted a raised allophone approaching I. It is attested in only one document, a set of grave stellae from 424 BC. Glyph shapes. Many of the letters familiar from the classical Greek alphabet displayed additional variation in shapes, with some of the variant forms being characteristic of specific local alphabets. The form of zeta generally had a straight stem, xi typically had a vertical stem, and phi was most often. Upsilon and psi had frequent variants where the strokes branched out from the bottom of the character, resulting in an respectively. Eta was originally a closed rectangular shape and developed several variants with different numbers of or arrangements of connecting bars between the two outer stems. The early shape of epsilon was typically with the arms diagonal and the stem descending below the lowest arm. It developed to the modern orthogonal form epsilon during the Archaic era. An analogous change was observed with which changed from to either or. Early forms of mu typically had the left stem descending lower than the right stem for per second. Pi also typically had a shorter right stem. Rho, in turn, could have a downward tail on the right, approaching a Latin R. In many red varieties, delta too had variants where the left stroke was vertical, and the right edge of the letter sometimes rounded, approaching a Latin D. The crooked shape of sigma could be written with different numbers of angles and strokes. Besides, the classical form with 4 strokes was commonly found, and was particularly characteristic of some mainland Greek varieties including Attic and several red alphabets. The C-like lunate, a form of sigma that was later to become the standard form in late antiquity and Byzantine writing, did not yet occur in the Archaic alphabets. The letter I had 2 principal variants: the classical straight vertical line, and a crooked form with 3, 4 or more angular strokes. The crooked type was the older form, and remained common in those varieties where it could not be confused with sigma because sigma was absent in favor of san. The letters gamma and lambda had multiple different forms that could often be confused with each other, as both are just an angle shape that could occur in various positions. C-like forms of gamma were common in many mainland varieties and in the West, where they inspired the italic CL-like shapes of lambda, were particularly common in Euboea Attica and Boeotia. Achaean colonies had a gamma in the form of single iota-like vertical stroke. The letter alpha had different minor variants depending on the position of the middle bar, with some of them being characteristic of local varieties. The letter beta had the largest number of highly divergent local forms. Besides the standard form, there were forms as varied as t and kappa, nu, omicron and tau displayed little variation and few or no differences from the classical forms. All letters could additionally occur in a mirrored form, when text was written from right to left, as was frequently done in the earliest period. Important local alphabets. Old Attic Athens, until the late 5th century BC, used a variant of the Ionian alphabet with chi sigma for Ks and phi sigma for Ps. Epsilon was used for all 3 sounds, e, and omicron was used for all of o. Eta was used for the consonant per hour. Among the characteristics of Athens writing were also some variant local letter forms, some of which were shared with the neighboring alphabet of Euboea, a form of lambda that resembled a Latin L. By the late 5th century, use of elements of the Ionic alphabet side by side with this traditional local alphabet had become commonplace in private writing, and in 403 BC, a formal decree was passed that public writing would switch to the new Ionic orthography consistently, as part of the reform after the 30 Tyrants. This new system was subsequently also called the Euclidean alphabet, after the name of the archoneucleides who oversaw the decision. Ubian. The Ubian alphabet was used in the cities of Eretria and Chalkis and in related colonies in southern Italy, notably in Cumae in in Pithekusi. It was through this variant that the Greek alphabet was transmitted to Italy, where it gave rise to the old Italic alphabets, including Etruscan and ultimately the Latin alphabet. Some of the distinctive features of the Latin as compared to the standard Greek script are already present in the Ubian model. The Ubian alphabet belonged to the Western type. It had chi equals k's and psi equals k. Like most early variants, it also lacked omega and used data for the consonant per hour rather than for the vowel. It also kept the archaic letters di gamma equals with an upper equals k. San equals per second was not normally used in writing, but apparently still transmitted as part of the alphabet, because it occurs in a B.C. area found in Italy and was later adopted by Etruscan. Like Athens, Euboea had a form of lambda that resembled a Latin L and a form of sigma that resembled a Latin S. Other elements foreshadowing the Latin forms include gamma, shaped like a pointed C, and rho, shaped like R. The classicist Barry B. Powell has proposed that Euboea may have been where the Greek alphabet was first employed, c. 775–750 BC, and that it may have been invented specifically for the purpose of recording epic poetry. Corinthian. The Doric dialect of Corinth was written in a distinctive alphabet that belonged to the Eastern type as far as its treatment of p, k, pst was concerned, but differed from the Ionic and Classical alphabet in several other ways. Corinth used san instead of sigma for per second, and retained upper for what was presumably a retracted allophone of k before back vowels, is described above. It also had an uncommon system for marking its sounds, with a beta-shaped letter used for e and an epsilon used only for long close e. For the consonant beta, in turn, Corinth used the special form. The letter iota was written like a sigma. Summary table. The following summary of the principal characteristic forms of representative local Greek scripts is based on the chapters on each dialect in Jeffrey. Bibliography. Brix C. Le dialecte grec de Pamphylie. Documents Agramer. Paris. Maisonneuve. Jeffrey. Lillian H. The Local Scripts of Archaic Greece. Oxford. Clarendon. Nicholas Nick. Proposal to add Greek epigraphical letters to the UCS. Technical report is Unicode Consortium, 2005. Juanicasters. Epigraphic sources for early Greek writing. Epigraphy site based on the archives of Lillian Jeffrey, Oxford University. Threat. Leslie. The Grammar of Attic Inscriptions. I. Phonology. Berlin. De Gruyter. Voteras. E. The Introduction of the Alphabet. Inchristides A. F. A History of Ancient Greek, from the Beginnings to Late Antiquity. Cambridge. pp. 266–276. Revised and expanded translation of the Greek edition. Wachter R. I. Navayungan of Thenovan Assasos 1657. Epigraphica Anatomica. 30–1. Willie Andreas. Cows, houses, hooks, the Greco-Semitic letter names as a chapter in the history of the alphabet. Classical Quarterly. 58, 401–423. DO 10.1017 S00098388000517. Woodard, Roger D. Greek Writing from Knossos to Homer. A linguistic interpretation of the origin of the Greek alphabet and the continuity of ancient Greek literacy. Oxford. Oxford University Press. Woodard, Roger D. Alphabet. In Wilson, Nigel Guy. Encyclopedia of Ancient Greece. London. Routledge. Woodard, Roger D. Greek Dialects. The Ancient Languages of Europe. Cambridge. Cambridge University Press. Woodard, Roger D. Phoeniki Grammata, an alphabet for the Greek language. In Baker, Egg. J. A companion to the ancient Greek language. Oxford. Blackwell.